Hello, family, and welcome to Amazing Parents Network. I am the host of this show. My name is Ali Lankarani, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer. I'm a clinical neuroscientist, and I am very happy that you have taken the time to be here with us tonight. We have dozens of experts that are going to be presenting in the upcoming months. These are called the Family Education Series. Please invite your friends and family to come and benefit from the resources and the expertise that is going to be presented here. We're glad to have you here. We're glad to have our experts. Enjoy tonight's presenter. Thank you.
Everybody, and welcome back. I am so glad you joined me again for another edition of Become an Empowered Parent. This is week 2, session 2 of this journey, this 6-week journey of how I can help you prepare yourself to be in charge of your child's education. I am Heigh, Avritt, co-founder of Vibrant Family Education and presenter for today. A little bit about me, just in case you didn't get into session number 1. I was a teacher for 27 years, and during those 27 years, I learned a lot about how to educate children and how to help families choose great education for their children. But the last 2 years of my career were the most impactful. I spent 2 years in the online school in our school district, helping families do exactly what I hope that you're finding out that you want to do with your child right now, to become the empowered parent, to become the parent who is involved in your child's education, who chooses the best kind of education for your child, and better yet, maybe even bringing education home. Now, what does that mean? Bring education home? For us at Vibrant Family Education and this series, bringing education home is just that. You're bringing the education of your child into the home, from the family, with the family, and becoming the best family and the best educators that you can be for your child, so that you can have your child grow up to be happy, healthy, and successful in their life. When we talk education, remember, it's not just academics. It is the whole child, the whole family. We want your child to be filled with confidence. We want your child to know what they need to know to be successful in their future endeavors, to have a passion and a drive to move their life forward so they can be successful and happy and healthy, feeling vibrant and alive, and knowing that they have the confidence to either learn what they need to know or take what they've already learned and use it to fulfill their life in very, very meaningful ways. Over the next 6 weeks, we will be exploring different topics around education and family life that will help you become the empowered parent. You will feel confident about making choices about your child and their education. You will learn the mindset that you need to overcome and have to become your child's educator. And you will also consider learning an environment that is conducive to the best learning for you and your child and your family. Become an empowered parent with me and prepare yourself to be your child's best educator. Why is this so important to me? I told you my story last week. I told you how things changed in the education system, how I felt kind of dissatisfied with where I was and how I wanted to connect more with families. But why else is it so important for this series for you to become an empowered parent? Well, it goes to reading. A lot of it has to do with reading. If your child is not reading at the grade level that they need to be at, if they can't learn for themselves and they've never learned how to become an inspired learner, a lifelong learner, then we have a major problem in our families, in our communities, and in our nation. Here's some statistics for you, and this just brings home why this is so important to me. Right now, across the United States, 54% of our adults have a literacy rate of 6th grade or below. That's a 2020 statistic. It's not that far off. I know it's 2024 now, but it takes a while to get the statistics and the surveys and everything done. But that is just staggering to me, that 54% of our adults in our country from age 16 to about 74 only read at a 6th grade reading level. Now, that might give them the basic skills to do regular, simple jobs. It might give them the basic reading skills to be mostly functional in our society. But is that really what we want? Do we want them to struggle through life because they can't gain the information they need because they're not literate at a higher grade level? Here's another statistic for you. With a low level of literacy that we have in the United States right now, the US spends up to $2.2 trillion per year to help fix that problem, as far as like not substituting, but supporting people who can't get good paying jobs and other services that could be diverted somewhere else. Another really startling fact is that a lot of our students, when they're in school, they're not getting the help that they need to build their confidence, to build their mastery in their learning. So with all of that combined and everything I've seen over the last several years, it is super important to me that I help families think about their education, think about how they want their children educated, and to give them options and choices as to where and how they can move and grow and help educate that whole child. Last week, we covered 2 super basic starting points, but super important starting points. One of those starting points was family values. If you are going to make a major change in your life, in your child's life, hopefully that's coming from your family values. We talked last week about how family values help guide and help course correct and course direct the way your family is living. What is important to you? What is important that your children know? What is important with how you interact with the world around you? We covered several different questions, and I asked people to please write those down. What are your 5 core family values? We spoke about how they change over time, because when your children are really little, you want certain values instilled in them. As they grow older, other things become more important to you. And as they get ready to leave your home, even other values are a little bit more important or need more focus. It's not that your values change, it's just that you focus on different ones at different times because that's what's needed for that time. And that's okay. And you might not even have your family values written down right now. My challenge is homework from last week. Write those down and see where you want to move your family from. What values you want to move through life with your family. The second thing we talked about last week is goals. What are your goals for this preparation that you're doing? You're becoming an empowered parent to do what? What are your goals? What do you want for you, your family, and your child's education? How do you want them to learn? What do you want them to learn? Is there something that is more important that you think they should learn than maybe what another family might be learning? For some, religious and family values is super important. So they spend a lot of time educating their child about those. Some families, academics are super important because they want their child to be college bound, or they want their child to become a lawyer or a doctor, something like that. So academics is really a strong goal. Is your child getting the academics they need for the passion, the plan, the goals that they want to achieve as they grow up? So then part of the lesson from last week, like I said, is writing down your goals. And how do your family values inform your education goals? How can they work together to make sure that you are helping to develop and grow a well-rounded child that is educated in many different ways? That was a definition I wanted to revisit this week. What is education? In this series, education is not just the academics, reading, writing, math, science, social studies that your child needs to be knowledgeable. but also the heart, the human part of the child that you want to grow and develop so they're confident, honest, have perseverance, all those key characteristics that you hope your child will have as they grow. Maybe it's coming from a place of lack in that you didn't get to develop a certain skill set when you were growing up. Maybe you had some characteristics that were not quite very helpful to you that you want to make sure your child doesn't develop those same characteristics, right, as they're growing up. Maybe it's a family lifestyle change. Maybe you absolutely love the way your parents raised you and have a wonderful feeling and remembering of that family life. And so you want your child to have those same special memories. Unfortunately, there's some of us that didn't have a super happy family life and you want to change that. Well, let's change it by becoming an empowered parent. The reason you're joining me here on this series. So today, as we continue on our journey of becoming an empowered parent, I want you to think about what kinds of things your child will need for the education that you want them to gain. One of the things we talk about a lot is the environment of learning. Do you want that environment to be in a place of classroom, in a place of hands-on experiences, in a place in your home? What is the environment for the child's learning? Well, today we're going to explore the many different aspects of that environment because it's not just about having the right crayons and the right paper and the right computer to use. There's so much more to it than just that. So today, one of the first things I want you to think about in the environment for your child is how much sleep are they getting? You might say, wait a minute, what does sleep have to do with the environment for learning? Well, it has to do with how can your child learn if their brain is not fully awake and fully prepared for the day. If the environment that you have around your child, for your child, is not conducive to sleep, then how are they going to be able to learn something new when they're sleep deprived, when they're moody, when they're not feeling well because they didn't get the amount of sleep that they need? Here's something for you. Did you know how much amount of sleep your child really needs each night? There's lots of studies who've looked at sleep and children and adults as well. Here you go. Infants from 4 months to 12 months, they need an average of 12 to 16 hours of sleep a day. Yes, over half their day should be in sleep. Why? Because they're bringing in so much information. They're processing so many things. Their body is growing and changing so much that they need that much sleep to integrate the ideas, to have the energy to move and grow and continue to develop as a little human, right? So infants, 4 months to 12 months old, 12 to 16 hours a day. Again, think about how much sleep is your child actually getting. Toddlers, 1 to 2-year-olds, guess what? They still need a lot of sleep, 11 to 14 hours a day. Think about that. That's still half of the day. Of a 24-hour day, they still need 11 to 14 hours of sleep. Again, because their brain is processing all of the information that's coming into them. Their body is trying to grow and develop and change. And if they don't get that sleep, yeah, when they've missed that nap, when they didn't sleep well the night before, when the dog interrupted their sleep schedule, right? All of those things. What happens? Usually their mood is off. They're grumpy. They aren't able to handle new situations, all sorts of things that sleep really, really is super important for. Let's talk about our next step, our early elementary preschool kids, our 3 to 5-year-olds. Guess what? They should still be getting 10 to 13 hours of sleep a day, right? 10 to 13 hours of sleep a day. That is a lot of sleep. But again, what are they doing every day? They're absorbing so much information. They're trying to make connections of what they learned and what they experienced, as well as their bodies growing and changing. If they don't get that sleep, their brain's not ready. They are not ready to be good learners. So even our 3 to 5-year-olds, about half the day, they should be sleeping. If your family's on the go all the time, yes, you have older siblings and things like that, and they have to be off at sports and they have to be off at dance and music and all of these different busy activities that our families are in right now in our world. Is your little one getting the sleep that they need to grow and develop? What can you change? How can you make it a little bit easier to make sure that they're getting the sleep that they need? Let's go to our 6 to 12-year-olds, our elementary and early middle school ages. 6 to 12-year-olds still need 9 to 12 hours of sleep a day. Yes, our 6 to 12-year-olds still need 9 to 12 hours of sleep a day. So when I was in school, when I was in that public classroom, I would always encourage my students to please get enough sleep, especially before tests, but even before tests, just to have a good day the next day. And I would ask them, how much sleep did you get last night? And especially the last few years that I was in the classroom, I had students tell me, 8-year-old students, second graders, tell me that they were going to bed at 10 o'clock at night. Well, school started for us at 7:30 in the morning. How in the world, if they're going to sleep at 10 o'clock at night and getting up and getting ready to be at school at 7:30 in the morning, how were they getting 9 to 12 hours of sleep a night? They weren't. They were becoming sleep deprived at a very, very early age. And then, of course, with all the stimulus and noise and chaos that happens in a classroom, how could they really be their best at learning, right? 9 to 12 hours a day for those 6 to 12-year-olds. And then our teenagers, well, we think they need a lot more, kind of like the infants, but they don't. They're just a little bit moody, a little bit different. But guess what? They still need 8 to 10. So if your teenager staying up until 11 o'clock at night and then getting up and going to school at 7:30 in the morning, are they getting the amount of sleep that they need? And then we wonder why we have moody teenagers, right? Well, of course, there's so many other things going on. But if they aren't getting the proper amount of sleep, sleep and learning, it goes together. Have you heard the stats that, guess what? When you're sleeping, that's when your brain coordinates and congeals the lessons and learnings of the day. That is the time when your brain processes and gets rid of all of the extra that it doesn't need, puts together the pieces that make sense, and then cements them into the brain for future retrieval. If you're not getting proper sleep, if your child's not getting proper sleep, that process is not happening. So that is one of the reasons I bring up right now that sleep is so important to your learning environment. Now let's flip that a little bit. If your learning environment were to change, if you became the empowered parent who decided to change their child's education structure and maybe their environment, what could the sleep do for them? We know some of our children and adults, all of us, are naturally nighttime people. We like to stay up a little bit later. We like to sleep in the morning. Others are opposite. They like to go to bed early and then they like to get up early. What if your child's learning could happen in their optimal awake time? So instead of having to go in and shake them and wake them up to start learning by going to school, by going to a different place, what if they could sleep naturally into their normal sleep rhythm and then wake up and be refreshed and ready to learn? Just one of the things that you can think about as becoming an empowered parent for your child. Is there a way that you can change their schedule, change and make sure they get enough sleep so that their education really sinks in? Sleep is one of those keys to an important learning education, to get what you need and what your student needs out of their learning time. Okay. Another thing that we really like to focus on is their learning style. If you're becoming an empowered parent, if you're becoming someone who can change your child's education, let's look at their learning style. Do you know what the learning styles are? Have you heard of learning styles before? I'm going to go over them briefly now, just as part of our learning here. And then you can start looking into more information if you want it. Right now, as the learning and information comes out, they talk about 4 major learning styles. There's the visual learner, the kinesthetic learner, the auditory learner, and then the reading, writing learner. Now, if you look at the base words of those, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, you can kind of understand what it is about each of those learning styles. But I want to go a little bit deeper here just for a minute, okay? As defined by Carter et al. In 1999, a learning style is a particular way in which the mind receives and processes information. Okay, so we might think that a visual learner would be someone who would love to watch things on video all the time. Actually, that one's a little bit tricky. Our visual learners actually pick up visual cues from graphs, maps, charts, and other things that they watch, not necessarily a video, but what they watch and experience in their life. So all the visual people really make connections by what they see. Our auditory learners prefer to learn by having information spoken to them, right? So, and often they do their thinking by talking as well. So auditory, they talk it and then they hear it again and they do their thinking in that way. Have you ever had a child who just sits there and they just keep explaining and explaining the same idea over and over? They know that you understand, but they're probably trying to say it in a couple of different ways so that it makes sense to them. So our auditory learners take in information by listening, and this is where the videos and stuff might come in a little bit better for their auditory learner, but then they also process by talking and rehearing what they're finding out about. So discussions are great ways for these boys and girls to learn, okay? Our kinesthetic learners, we know, are those who prefer the hands-on experiences, right? But not all learning is available from personal experiences. So sometimes simulation, like video game simulations or reading and reacting back and forth to different simulations, are ways that they can connect their learning. So if they can't do it hands-on physically by building, by cutting, by sewing, by putting things together, right? Their personal experiences are also how they learn. Then they can do it sometimes by simulations and having discussions with other people. So there's our kinesthetic learners. The last set of learners is our reading and writing learners. Now, these boys and girls, these students love books. They love text. They love reading and digesting all of that information. So whether they learn it in a book by reading and then write about it to digest their thinking and cement their ideas, or whether they are reading a book and taking notes out of that book, right? Text books are the best thing in the world for our reading, writing learners. Let me give you a couple of more examples. When I was in the classroom, it was super important because I knew that out of my 30 students that I had in the room, that I gave experiences to lots and lots of different students in different ways. So instead of just standing in front of the classroom, which is never usually a very good thing to do, right? Because you're just focusing on the one person. I always made sure that the students had something in their hands, like, for example, a note paper that they would take notes on. Or maybe they were cutting and gluing as I was explaining the process. So you can see what learners were just involved and engaged there. We had our visual learners because they were looking and watching. We had our kinesthetic learners because they were either writing or they were cutting and gluing. And then we had our auditory learners because they could pick up on what I was saying as I was saying it. So as we think about the environment for learning, whether it's still in the classroom because you need to keep your child in the classroom, or whether it's a home learning experience on the weekend because you're augmenting their public education, you're helping them learn things that they want to learn. Or maybe you've taken the complete step and you're doing it at home, you're homeschooling or education at home, as I like to call it. What kind of learning styles can you incorporate in different lessons, different ways that you introduce information to your child? Now think about this. If your child is not a very good visual learner, is it okay to still give them visual prompts to help them learn? Yes, because we want to strengthen that thing that might be a little bit weak, but are they going to get their main amount of learning from there? No, okay. The other thing is that most of us are a combination of a couple of different learning styles, right? So if you think about our young gentlemen who are running around all the time, exploring and learning that way, they're definitely kinesthetic. They want to learn by doing, right? But they also lots of times are also visual learners because as they're putting things together, they're seeing how the different concepts connect and work together. So all of our learners are usually a combination of one of the four main lessons, okay? So thinking about our environment again, today we're focusing on the environment for education. What is needed to become the empowered parent and have the best learning situation for your child? Now, like I said, maybe you do need to keep it into the regular classroom. You're sending them off to school. They're at preschool, they're at elementary school, they're at middle school. But what can you do to make sure that they're getting what they need in that situation? An empowered parent will make sure that they've checked in with the teacher. What's available to your student in the different learning styles? How are the different experiences happening in the classroom? And again, this varies from age to age. When they're very little, preschool and beginning elementary school, should they be sitting in a desk all the time trying to learn? No. Hopefully they have experiences around the room helping them learn, and they are working on all the different kinds of learning experiences. Of course, when they get older, they can still a little bit longer. But again, do you want a teacher that just stands in front of the classroom and just talks to them all day? Or do they need to have the breaks? Do they need to have the hands-on by cutting, gluing, experiencing? Do they need to have the auditory? Do they need to have time for discussion about the different things that the teacher is teaching and they are learning, right? So even though you have to maybe send your child still to school, you are still an empowered parent because you're checking in. How is learning happening in that classroom? Maybe you're the empowered parent because you are augmenting, you're adding to your child's learning on the weekends. Maybe they're going to art classes. Maybe they're going to dance classes. Maybe you're doing something as a family and you have a kind of a learning style as a family. What can you do to make sure you're incorporating all of the learning styles when you're doing those kinds of projects? And like I said, if you have brought education all the way home, you're doing it all with your child. What kinds of things can you change up and do a little bit different to incorporate all of the different learning styles to help that learning environment be the best it can be for you and your child? One of the things that I found as I was leaving the education system was, and one of the biggest issues that causes this problem of our students not reading where they need to be or not having the math skills that they need to be, is that in their schools, they are not taught to mastery. They're expected to master, but every once in a while, actually more than once in a while now, the teachers are on a schedule. They have to be on chapter 3, page 7 by the end of March, or else they aren't following curriculum with fidelity, or else they aren't going to get to the full range of curriculum for the school year in that subject, reading, writing, math, etc. So what they do is they teach to hopefully the mid-level, right? And whenever the majority, or at least in the middle range of kids, have that skill, then they move on. Or if it's on their schedule, they just have to move on, even though it's not mastered. How can you, as an empowered parent, help fix that? How do you help fix mastery versus scheduling of curriculum? Let's go back and talk about if your child is in a program. They're in a preschool, they are in an elementary school, a public school, and you don't have control over the curriculum. What you do have control over is how much time you spend with your child checking in and knowing if they are really getting that skill. So, for example, your child's been learning about multiplication in school, and you know there's a big test coming up. Ask that teacher for a grade immediately. Check in with the teacher and find out what skills were lacking in that test, and then go back and help reteach your student, or get a tutor to help reteach your student so that they don't have gaps and holes. Teach your children to mastery. Help them learn to mastery the things, the academics that they need to learn so they don't have gaps and holes. Maybe you're a parent who's doing the part-time, right? They're going to public education, but then after school, you're teaching them other amazing life skills, things that they need to know that will help carry them forward. Again, don't do it on a schedule. Don't do it according to, oh, you teach this page and then this page, and then you to read this book. And make sure your child is learning to mastery. They can show you that they understand the concept and the skill that you've been working with them on, right? Before you move on to something else. If you're on a sports team, you bet those coaches are watching. Have they learned the dribbling in soccer to mastery? Can they actually dribble before they're put in the front line to go score that goal, right? If they're in dance, have they learned the dance moves to mastery so that they don't fall and hurt themselves when they're out with the big production with the rest of the team or the rest of the dance recital? If they're in music, has your student practiced enough so they have mastery of grabbing the chords or moving the bow the right way across the violin, whatever instrument that they're learning? There's a big difference between mastery and then just moving along when it's good enough. So please become that empowered parent and check in. Is your child getting it to mastery? If not, figure out a way to help them. If you're that homeschool parent, you're the education at home person that I'm talking to in these recordings as well, don't just move on because you think it's time. Help your child learn to mastery, because if they know their skills to mastery, then the next skill you introduce, which is usually a layering on of the next level, they get it so much easier because they're not fighting holes. Maybe you're someone who is trying to become the empowered parent and you're reteaching, right? You'd like, okay, public school hasn't worked. I'm going to homeschool and they should be in the 3rd grade. Please don't do that. Go back and look at what your student has mastered and fill in those holes, because guess what? Learning will be so much easier if you can get that mastery and then move forward. Another thing that I really want to make sure that we are talking about in our learning environments as we're setting things up, as we're looking at how to help our students learn the best, is what kind of noise level your student can handle, what kind of chaos your student can handle, what can you handle as a parent, as someone who's trying to teach them, right? So if we go back to the different examples, we're in the classroom and we know that the teachers, many are doing the best they can to keep the chaos, keep the calm, and level to a place where most students can learn. Did you hear that word? Most. There are students who are not going to be doing well in that classroom, no matter what the teacher does. If you're a parent who is augmenting and adding to the curriculum, right? What kind of learning environment, noise level, chaos level, can you handle to become a good instructor? And your child can handle to do really good learning. Do you need to shut off the TV and just have the equipment right in front of you that you're going to be using, right? Instead of having a whole bunch of extra noises. If you're the parent who's educating at home, again, look at your learning environment as far as noise level and activity level and things like that, and help suit it to your child, your student, okay? This brings me to myth number 2. Last week when I started talking with you, I told you that there's 3 main myths that parents believe. That means that they can't educate their child at home. They can't become homeschooling parents. The first one I talked about last week was that they can't be the best teacher for their child because they maybe weren't good in school, or maybe they don't think they know what they need to teach their child. But remember, I told you last week, and I'll say it again this week, you are your child's first best educator. Does that mean you have to know everything? No. Can you get help with the things that you don't know? Yes, but you know your child's moods. You know their learning styles, even though you just heard them maybe for the first time, you gave them a label this week. Last week, you knew how they learn better, best, right? With the different activities. You are your child's first best teacher, and you can be your child's educator. This myth this week is about not enough time. Most of the time I hear parents saying, I don't have time to be my child's educator. I can't do this because we're so busy. I can't have my child come home from public schools and be taught at home because there's not enough time. That is a myth. If you look at all of the different things that I've talked about today, sleep patterns and schedules, learning styles, learning to mastery, and then also the environment as far as noise level and chaos level and things like that. If all of those are planned out, and that's what I'm helping you do here, is think about these things and plan these things out, guess what? If you have a great learning environment, learning does not take as much time as it does in the public school. If you were to bring education home, remember that you don't need 6 hours a day to help your student learn. Why? Because of all those things I was just talking about. They're ready to learn because they've gotten enough sleep. They're ready to learn because the noise level, the chaos level is at a level that they can handle. They're ready to learn because you know that they have mastered the skill before the new skill that you're introducing. And finally, they're ready to learn because they don't have extra noise and chaos and unfocused time. Okay. A lot of people are like, wait a minute. If it takes the schools 6 or 7 hours a day to educate my child, why would it take so much less time at home? Well, think about this. First of all, you're not moving around 30 kids in a classroom trying to get everybody, right? You give them work time, give the lesson, give them work time, check in with everybody, make sure that that mastery hopefully is happening. You're not being interrupted by going to lunch, by going to PE, by having recess time, by maybe, unfortunately, somebody having a meltdown in the classroom and throwing off the whole schedule, or guest speakers or assemblies. There's so much time in the public school that some people call wasted. Other people say it's just the way it has to work to make sure that everybody gets what they need. You get to take all that extra time out when you're educating at home, and you get to fill it with things that are helpful for your child. So it does not take as long at your home with education at home to help them learn, right? So you do actually have more time than you think that you can make this happen. Another thing I want to talk about is your schedule. If you are educating at home, you're bringing education home, your schedule is flexible. You are not having to deal with the 7 to 3 of the school. You can do it when your child is awake and active and learning. Maybe they learn best in the afternoon. So you do other activities and learning and things in the morning, and then you do the main academic learning that you need your child to do in the afternoon when they're awake and ready, right? Okay, so think about that. You have tons of flexible time when you bring education home. So you do have enough time. You're like, oh, wait a second. No, no, no. I'm a super busy entrepreneur. I have a small business I'm running. There's a whole bunch of other things. I have 4 kids running around the house. This is going to take way too much time. Again, as you work and think about becoming the empowered parent and really putting into the place the things that I've been talking about, you will find that you have more time than you think. And you can shift things, right? You can do things a little bit differently at a time that your family has good rhythm and rhyme and schedule, and make it work for you and your family. All right. Another thing that a lot of people say is that, oh, I have to follow the school schedule because otherwise they won't be able to be involved in sports, or they won't be able to be involved in the other activities like the other kids. Well, now you have more options, right? You get to decide when your child will go for their swimming lessons and when they will have their dance lessons and things like that. And there are some students who like those early morning swim lessons or dance lessons if they're available, because then they are more engaged and in tuned at that time. So the myth of not having enough time to educate the way you want to with your child goes back to the beginning. What are your family values? What are the goals for your child's education? And what can you do as a whole family to make sure that you are the empowered parent, helping the child have the best learning experience that they can have, and that you can make sure that they're learning to mastery? Thinking about all of these things, how are you doing? Are you taking that step and figuring out that maybe a change can happen? Maybe there's a way that I can rearrange this part of my week and get help over here and support over here, or rearrange my work schedule so that I can. A lot of families also say, there's no way I can have time to be my child's educator because I'm a single parent. Again, I challenge you, thinking about all of the different things I talked about today, thinking about all of the different things I talked about last week. What are your priorities? What can you do? Is there other support mechanisms out there to help you make this empowered change? And does it have to be all at once? Absolutely not. Maybe this year, this coming year, you dip your toe in a little bit and take more charge of your child's education. And the next year, you take a little bit more. And then you realize, oh, I can do this, and it's going to be better for my child. So you take the big step and become an educator at home, a homeschool family that wants your child learning in these ways. I know it's not a perfect fit for everybody, but that's part of becoming an empowered parent. You know what you want, you know how you want it, you know what's best for your family and your child. I leave you today with the idea of, what is the best learning environment for my child? How much sleep do they need? What kind of learning style are they coming from? How can I support that learning style? I want my student to learn to mastery. What do you need to do to make sure they have mastered skills before they move on? And finally, don't forget, you do have time. It's up to you to think about what will be the best for you and your child. And remember, it doesn't take as long as in the public school system. You should not be taking the public school system and bringing it and plopping it into your living room. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week when you come back and join me for the next session where we will be looking into the legal requirements of what this big change might look like, and also the support mechanisms that are around for helping you make these learning changes. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you picked up some wonderful ideas and made that next step to becoming the empowered parent that will make the best choice for you and your child's education. Until next week, I'll see you later. Bye.